As you go around the world and you talk to investors, you talk to executives, you talk to the CEOs of these companies, what's the mood right now?
It's like the Michael Jackson Thriller video. That would be the best way I could compare the mood. It is as troubling as I've ever seen because there's so much nervousness in terms of uncertainty. We don't know our inputs. What's demand going to look like? CapEx, do we cut it now? No one's giving guidance. So, I mean, I just find that if someone's been the most bullish, over the decades, you cannot go into this earnings season and be like, it's baked in. Look, it's a new reality. And that's why when they say near-term pain, we've talked about it so much. Near-term pain, it would take Apple 4 to 5 years to build a new factory, $30 billion, just to move 10% of the supply chain, and iPhones will be 3,500. We should build them in New Jersey if you like iPhones being 3,500. That fundamentally is the issue in big tech, CapEx, projects. That, to me, is what's so scary in terms of, all the conversations that I've had.
Can you give a sense? Apple seems to be on the lowest end of flexibility when it comes to rejiggering the way it does business in the wake of some of these new rules of the road. What about some of the other tech companies? What about the Microsofts of the world, as well as the Oracles, some of the companies that are integral to a lot of corporate business planning in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, look, software, and we've told investors, defensive-wise, like in this bunker mentality, software is going to outperform. In terms of Oracle, Microsoft, Salesforce, cybersecurity, Palo Alto, CyberArk, among others. But it's still, okay, I ordered a server, $100,000, comes in a rack, so am I going to get hit with a bill 2 months later for another $100,000 in terms of what happened, in terms of what's come from China? So the uncertainty, software is impacted because it's CapEx. They're also driven by hyperscalers, driven by CapEx, driven by the AI, a lot of this spending. So that's why it's the ripple effect that impacts software as well. I think they're the best house relative to this neighborhood and probably, we will say, less impacted, but they're not immune because this is going to impact all of tech. And I think across the board, tech earnings comes down off the gate 10 to 15%, just for starters. And then you wonder, okay, what's baked in from there? Where do we go?
Dan, you're talking about potentially, if it's made in the U.S., a $3,500 iPhone. With a 140% tariff rate, is it still cheaper to make it in China?
And that's why you're going to have $2,300 iPhones, $2,100. And that's why it just comes down to, Emery, I think the reality, and Apple, they're in the eye of the storm. They have no flexibility. And you can talk about things like, do they get exemptions? Where do they play? India.
Do they get exemptions?
Look, and again, no one knows because you don't know rules of the game. And maybe they get some exemptions, but not all exemptions. But then what about A, B, C? What about, do they get exemptions? And I think that's why, from an investing perspective, every other time in 25 years, from financialcrisis.com, you could be able to look through things, be like, okay, on the other side. Here, you don't know rules of the game. You could wake up being like, you drive on the left side of the road, your name's Tim, it's not Dan. And so that's the reality when it comes to these stocks.
Okay, but these companies have had warnings, and I'm not just talking about Trump on the campaign trail. Even Biden was pushing for de-risking when it comes to Beijing and Washington. Trump talked about this in the first term, and there was tariffs in the first term. Why didn't they do more to put supplies outside of China? Because
you basically can't. I mean, the reality is, like, this is a supply chain that's been built for 20, 30 years. The reality is, like, the IP, the way these products are made, anyone like myself that spends so much of my time in Asia, in China, throughout Taiwan, Vietnam, and others, you just can't, we don't have the manufacturing, the consumer cost basis from an employment perspective to actually do that here. And I think that's the whole issue, is that saying it and doing, they're two different, there's a reality and a fictional. And I think that, to us, is why we've been so troubled by what we've seen, because in my opinion, it takes U.S. tech back a decade. It cuts the knees off when it comes to AI revolution, unless we see negotiation and otherwise. And guess who the winner is? It's China tech.
So why have you still got to buy on Apple?
Because my view is that if I thought this was permanent and I thought this stays, then you downgrade every stock that you cover. It's the view that this is basically, whether it's 30, 60 days, it's the view that June, September quarters you basically throw out. You start to look at some sort of normalized 2026 number and a baseline situation. So my view is like you can't, but John, if you assume this stays for an elongated period of time, then it's game, set, match. So our view, the way that we've navigated is like...
Your assumption it doesn't hold, it doesn't stick, it's that bad.
If this holds, I mean, you talk about Armageddon, like that would be probably a good term to where I would see that just given the amount of products that come from China, the supply chain, U.S. tech.